Hey Matt, I'm Al Vasquez. I grew up in Davis, California. I'm a professional musician and I worked with a number of groups in the 90s.
Um, do you
And I,
remember?
I still play.
Do you
But
remember the music scene in the '80s, downtown Davis?
when I graduated from Irvine, I came home and I immediately hooked up with Jan Peters, who introduced me to Rob Ickes and Joe Craven. And I was fortunate enough to work with those guys for several years. It was mostly an acoustic scene, and Jan was in charge of the music lineup at the Blue Mango, which was a one of the few spots in town that had live music. It stressed acoustic music specifically, and uh, I didn't really meet anybody outside of that small acoustic circle for several years until I rented a art studio on Olive Drive, and Thin White Rope, Roger Kunkel's group, used to rehearse there in the studio, and that was my introduction into the alternative rock scene, which was fascinating. It wasn't my scene, but I was always impressed with how professional and how tight a unit the Thin White Rope was. It's an excellent group.
Do you remember all the different kind of venues in Davis or around the area for all the different genres of music that was playing?
Well, growing up, Davis had a lot of venues, a lot more. They had the Palms Playhouse. They had Mousie's, which my older sister used to go to see Creedence Clearwater and um, several other acts that were traveling nationally that wanted to play the university. It was either Mousie's or they'd play Freeborn Hall. Um, there was the Paragon, which had music, featured an acoustic player Gary Leoter, who I worked with on the weekends. Gary's claim to fame was Blue Cheer. He has a Rhino record retrospective of his writing for Blue Cheer, CAC, and Oxford Circle. And those bands I did not see officially. My sister knew them, and they used to play in our backyard for her high school parties. And they were great. They were very psychedelic. Uh, as an introduction, 11-year-old watching teenagers um, have a great time during the 60s. A lot of anxiety of many of the young people having to go to the Vietnam War, which I was totally oblivious to, but the band's popularity was sort of anti-establishment. And Gary Leoter being a principal songwriter for that group. But his his weekend gig at the Paragon was fun, just because he's a fun-loving guy, but an excellent songwriter, and he toured with Janis Joplin and Jimi Hendrix. He saw quite a bit during the '60s.
Do you remember some establishments or restaurants in Davis that were around in the '80s that are long gone now?
Yeah, Dr. Jekyll and Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde is where the Graduate wound up, and that was off of Covell, or off of Fifth Street, near. Now it's the University Mall. And that place was hideous.
But it was originally called Dr. Jekyll.
Dr. Jekyll's, yeah, and
Wow.
it was purple inside, and it was like a dance bar. There was the Antique Bazaar downtown Davis, across the street from the Paragon. But one of the places I really enjoyed when I came back was Larry Blake's. Larry Blake's is, I think it still exists on Telegraph in Berkeley, and Larry Blake's was a fun place. For some reason, the rumor is that one of the cooks had a disease that was affecting the quality of the food, or there were people who were afraid. This was during the HIV scare, so unfortunately for Larry Blake's, and if this is true, I have no idea. This is a rumor, but the rumor I heard from a bartender who worked there is that they lost business because of that. People were afraid. People had no clue or idea at that time how HIV actually spread, and the restaurant went under. I think it was set on fire, actually. I think it burned down.
It had a basement, didn't it? It had
Yeah, it had a
a
basement.
biker bar or something in the basement.
Had a basement.
It had sawdust on the ground or
Yeah,
something.
which the place that I'm fondest of in terms of my youth was the Saloon, which is now Woodstock's Pizza. The Bakers owned that. My dear friend Art Baker, who at least in junior high, I used to go there and work with him on the weekends. Imagine a 13-year-old in a bar where Harley Davidson driving dudes, big guys, would literally, they'd drive through the front door, they'd ride their bikes through the front door of the Saloon and park in the alley, which was then the Davis Police Department. And
Wow.
the Davis Police Department had no problem with it. It's now, I think it's now Bistro 33. But that was pretty common, and my job was to clean up the place at the end of the night.
Oh, wow.
And but that was fond memories of that place.
Any names you remember from people that were in bands? Someone that you admired or motivated by? in the
Again,
80s?
Roger Kunkel from Thin White Robe. The guys I worked with, Rob Ikes, who's a world-class dobro player, Joe Craven, world-class mandolin, fiddle player. I was fortunate enough to work with those. Those names stick out. Greg Spatz, the fiddler for John Reichman, an incredible fiddler. In terms of jazz, Roger Madison, who still lives in town, a fine jazz guitarist. Bill Scholler, who I worked with briefly, excellent blues guitarist. And forgive me, I can't really remember much else, but
Great. Thanks.
You're welcome.
Go ahead and tell me about what you're doing these days.
I'm Al Vasquez. I'm a percussionist / vocalist. Locally, I work with a group called the Muddy Waiters. I have my own jazz trio, and I work with another trio called Jazz Asylum. I have recorded on Rounder Records with Tony Furtado. Recently, I was on tour. I was hired to tour with Nell Robinson and the Jim Nunley Band, which is comprised of Jim Kerwin, of David Grisman, and Peter Grant, who formerly played with Hoyt Axton. And that was fun. We toured in Wyoming and Montana for a couple weeks, and it paid well. The food sucked, and it was exhausting. There's nothing glamorous about touring. It's really actually not that great. 11 hours in a van and in a plane, it sucked. But I'm a musicaholic. So it was fun to play, and it was an honor to play with such fine players and great venues. And I keep busy locally, and I'm blessed to play with fine players from the Bay Area off and on. And recently played with Joe Craven and Bill Edwards, who are fine musicians. Roger Kunkel as well. Rita Hoskins, who's also a local wonderful songwriter, beautiful vocalist. Just keep him busy, and that's about it.
Can you tell us about the time you played with Los Lobos?
I didn't play with Los. On that same tour. Los Lobos was double booked, and they were playing in this before us. And I thought it was our band setting up, and I walked into they were getting. I didn't play with them. They just looked at me like I was ice. And thought I was trying I made them feel very uncomfortable and told them, "Hey, I'm Chicano," even though I look like a madman. But that's my Los Lobos story.
All right.
I never sat in with Los Lobos.